Hope you enjoy this compilation of weirdness from cartoons belonging to completely different styles and universes from each other's. The oddities are conveniently sequenced in order of how they performed as individual uploads, best to worst, so that this video is least likely to get you bored. And if you still did and somehow dozed off, have a nice sleep. Dexter's Laboratory had quite a misleading title. The show was not all about Dexter's lab. It was not even all about Dexter for that matter. But about these recurring extensions to the show, remember them? Of course you do. They have to themselves their own separate fan base. It's possible your favorite Dexter's Laboratory joke is from one of them.
What do you get when you cross a zebra in a trench coat? A bunk on the head?
It's possible a character you admire is from one of these sections of the show as well. Gotta love Valhalla. It's possible you envy someone more than Dexter's dad who's here. For a show as iconic as Dexter's Lab, you'd think of it to be a bad idea for there to be these side shows. A little risky maybe, yeah? What if they ain't able to keep up with the standards set by the boy genius? The very first cartoons. And well, what a cartoon. No, it was first aired in the animation showcase series called What a Cartoon. Back in the February of 1995, when What a Cartoon was not even called What a Cartoon. And for such a legendary show to have more shows within it, do they stand a chance? Well, interestingly enough, they've pretty much been on par with Dexter's success, we could attest. They sure passed the test. And we can testify that they did do justice and justified. I mean, they have adorable characters, memorable storylines, banned episodes, and wait, what's that? Okay, not episodes, maybe singular, as it's just one that received this recognition to be excluded. But that's right, alongside root removal,
Where the are we? Beats the out of me!
we have Barbecue. An episode in the very first season of the show in which Barbecue's henchman Silver Spooner tries to sneak away some mustard and ketchup during Monkey's birthday party celebration, so that his master Barbecue could, feast on a planet in our solar system that's called Earth? Because, of course. Imagine we are superheroes at a picnic celebrating a monkey's birthday who's the strongest member of our group, by the way. And the next thing we know is this
Silverous swindler has commandeered our condiments.
This flamboyant spoof of Silver Surfer couldn't pick another spot in the whole world, could he? Oh, and with that voice,
Let the feast begin!
that wrist, and well, that name,
I am the Silver Spooner.
no wonder he's largely considered the gay stereotype. And all that while parodying a Marvel Comics character without permission? Marvelous. Good luck. You're freaking gonna need it. And oh well, guess what? After a couple of airings, the episode gets taken off from further runs. Post-writers receiving copyright infringement threats? Yeah, surprise, surprise. And also gets banned from Cartoon Network. It was even replaced in the season 1 DVD of the show in the US with the season 2 episode Dexter Lab Story. And no, it can't be watched on the mainstream online media streaming platforms. However, the episode did make it in the Australian season 1 DVD set of the show that was released in 2008. The episode, nonetheless, was special. Talking about these segments of Dexter's Lab, it wasn't always that the characters of Dial M for Monkey and Justice Friends came together to accomplish a purpose. Be it to celebrate Monkey's birthday or to save the world from getting eaten whole. The only other time it would happen then would be in the last but not the least, the very last episode of the show indeed, or of season 2 at least. Which anyway in many ways was the end of the entire series to a large part of the fan base. And why not? We don't get shows like that anymore. They won't make characters as that silvery swindler at all. Why would they? That's crazy. An unsafe decision in the creation process with dicey outcomes. But once they did, and somehow, despite having been banned for so long, look, he's here still. Well, today there's a kind of cartoon or anime genre for literally everybody. I'm sure this silver spooner can find his place somewhere too. At this point, he's like classic, The entire thing, in fact. One of the moments that stick out for me in the episode is when the barbecuer is pouring barbecue sauce on the planetary shish kebab and it starts to cover all the planets, including the Earth. You see the people screaming, seeing this swing of salsa that's about to fall over and swing them along. And it immediately hits you that, hey, it is probably one of the condiment bottles that Silver Spooner stole from the picnic that's been used by barbecuer here. Once kept on an average table, being handled by almost normal-sized hands, is now somehow able to make an entire solar system yummier. Brilliant. Size inconsistency, sure, in this episode of the show is so having a field day. Of course, for some reason, as always, the security of the globe and the Friends of Justice are very much unable to even come close to saving the world. They get electrocuted, they crash to the earth from space, and whatnot. No matter what you say, Silver Spooner interestingly seemed to have an upper hand over Monkey until the very end. How did he manage to do that? I'm glad you asked. One would assume he'd absorb Monkey's powers, manipulate gravity, or use telekinesis to gain control over him, but no. Just his commanding nature and hard-hitting, sharp-stinging slaps seemed to be enough. That's quite impressive. So how did Monkey make it this time, you might wonder? What helped him? Banana? Sleep? Or Wizard of Oz? Yeah, of course. If only Mr. Spooner could control his emotions and not fall for Monkey's cheap shot, he would know that they were out in space, way up over the rainbow for there to be Judy Garland anywhere around them. If only he could lose that spoon and not be a spoof, silly, silvery swindler. If only the eater of the worlds could be less picky with the food. Then maybe, just maybe, this marvel of an episode would have survived. And I wanted it to because I love it. The ban probably only defeated the purpose. Would have been great to have more runs of the episode back when Cartoon Network was really the sole network of the cartoons we'd know. Okay, they parodied bad, but hey, it belonged to Dexter's Lab. Laugh about his height all you want, but the show was a huge deal. It was even voted the most popular what a cartoon shot through various phone campaigns, web votes and focus groups. Before which we only really had kind of originals in Cartoon Network like the Moxie Show and Space Ghost, Coast to Coast, that, If it wasn't for the fall of Hanna-Barbera, if it wasn't for Fred Seibert's plan to let the artists break free, if it wasn't for Dexter's Lab, for God's sake, we would not have many of the classics that we know today. Powerpuff Girls, Cow and Chicken, etc. This was legit the most authentic Cartoon Network ever got. This was the age of innovation for new faces in animation. Animators were handed the power and were invited to pitch their creations to the network. Could we even try to conceive a level of creativity even close to that? Go ahead and try imagining a day of broadcast schedule of shows including cartoon characters, storylines and structure half as remarkable as what you see on the screen in 2025. No, sadly that's too happening to be happening now. People who know how to draw seem to have least freedom over what to draw. Control on the pencil is with people who hold the pen. Even though history is evident how audience has admired such originality. When things go outside of the hands, then hardly ever go outside of the pockets. In fact, originality also gives us the opportunity to regard the non-originals a little bit more. I mean, we as audience didn't care. We didn't know what's going on behind the scenes, whether what we're watching is new or a rerun, so long as it's fun. We know it now. Back then, we didn't, It was just about the images that stayed with us. Raw sounds, real deal, the good stuff. Whose business is dying, what company is trying to save itself, was all beyond our knowledge at the time. We just knew we lost something on the day that we did. We knew not what we did to deserve what we did. Just like we didn't know what we had done to witness a revolution as this. Some guys in some part of the world were coming up with shots that saved their jobs. In the process, though, not sure if they know, they were mixing the ingredients that prepared a memorable childhood for us to cherish.
Turner Entertainment Networks proudly present the world's first 24-hour cartoon network.
That we still hold close for occasional warmth. Memories that remain still fueling the passion to this day. Is not a responsibility or a thrill to flex. It is those pictures and audio in the head that's making it all fall flush and adhere. And I won't care if your favorite is a show where an Elvis impersonator with like the biggest biceps struggles to land a date, or the one where a dog has to keep saving a troubled couple from troubling ghosts at a troublesome place, or a little boy who secretly owns a whole lab. I wonder if there really is any good reason left for him to keep it a secret and hide it from his well-wishers when these destructive folks seem to have a 24/7 entry pass to get inside, as they appear to appear out of nowhere as they please, any day of the week. Change that goddamn name. There's so much more to it. Spin-off segments that go straight for the twist. Even someone who shouldn't exist. An action hero who could be rather polite. A delightful pony that's a devil inside. There's this Dee Dee's room that seems to be, or appears to me, much more a mystery than Dexter's laboratory. Oh, and how about this treehouse? Back of the bus. The detention room, mysterious cupboards. What about this place? And so many other places. There's just a lot to it. Knowing not, at times, what the craze is, we embrace it. Even if we avoid the places, how can we, the faces? All the characters in the show with their meticulously written and metaphorically linking storylines. No wonder it all needed separate subsections to flow into. Crossing universes, confusing audiences, until the day that it would all just suddenly stop. And we'd grow up. At the end, it hardly matters what angle we preferred, which story was our favorite. And if you more watched a show that I never found enough time to see, whether we do or do not agree, so long as we're not forgetting this logo. Jeez. Alternating blacks and whites that painted millions of childhoods. Colorful indeed. If you would. Please. Good. So, where were we at? Yeah. Why was this episode banned? Well, we'll address the elephants in the room, starting with the one usually people don't talk about when they talk about this episode, if they at all talk about it. Barbecue. A straight parody of Galactus. Maybe Marvel lost all confidence in Galactus after looking at Barbecue's awesome barbecuing skills and were worried Galactus might get scared off by the giant utensils of clearly the more dope Barbecue. Or we can just go with the more infamous one. This silver. There's not a single thing that I could think of adding to this character to make it any more anti-Silver Surfer. They say Barbecue is just as responsible for the ban as a Silver Spooner. Why does then the Silvery Swindler get all the hate? Well, I guess cause although Barbecue is basically Galactus, he still is the eater of the worlds. May not be the devourer, but hey, he still looks badass. Dude treats humans like mosquitoes. Barbecues our friggin' solar system.
Oh, say, can you see as he rubs our red glare?
And guess what? Whistles. Yeah, he needs condiments to down them spheres. Yes, he's seen biting on Uranus. Yes, a monkey turned him into a puger of the worlds, rather. But come on, it's all funny fun. Don't get me wrong, the Silver is funny too. Too funny though. And there's the problem. It's the kind of funny that you can't laugh at when the makers are around. Barbecue, spoof funny, silver, insult funny. So I guess we have a winner. Thank you, Silver Spooner. You had to work too hard for this victory that everyone, I guess, would agree you weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth, just under your feet. We're sorry we had to be spoon-fed about your achievements by nostalgia during all these years of your absence in order to just appreciate your presence. That's sincerely missed. And even if we get a wooden spoon to take this long to regard a silver spoon, guess it'll be cool. As we have learned to imagine lost castles we ruled and be fooled by the sights we admire without actually seeing or being there in time. Either that all, or we can just shrug it off blaming Grunk's drinking habits.
You can see the riding on the pavement. Young kids, they're growing up in basements. Online, a whole new generation. I'ma make mine, so you better go.
Did Butterfree die after the emotional goodbye in this episode of Pokemon? You see, there's this rumor that 4Kids edited out the passing of Ash's first Pokemon, and the main point of argument behind such a statement is that Brock or Takeshi actually says in the original Bye Bye Butterfree episode that after Butterfree's mate, they die. Now, did he really say that? The answer to that is simple. He did not. So how did this rumor come to be then? That, however, is not an easy question to answer, because it's not only an old rumor now but pretty vague as well. As where some people would claim that Takeshi says Butterfrees die after mating, on the other hand we heard he says mating is something Butterfrees like to do before they die, which however could just mean that mating is a thing for Butterfrees, like it is for any other insect or animal. After a point, it just seemed that people were putting words in Takeshi's mouth when they'd go on saying how Butterfree was actually about to die, which is why our heroes let him go to live the experience before it's too late. Either way, it is what it is, a rumor. So what are we gonna do in the rest of the video? Well, we're not here to debunk an already debunked theory, but rather to see if we can figure out where the rumor actually came from, because that seems to be more interesting here. And not to mention, people following the advanced generation might have noticed how Butterfree has been up and flying all this time, seeing it in the Glory Day theme and in the 10th anime opening called Spurt, this time along with his girlfriend. Even the manga folks would recall seeing him in Clefairy Tale and Haunting My Dreams. And now, of course, with his much awaited return in the final episode of Pokemon Journeys, the series, after staying off screen for 1200 episodes, the longest gap in Pokemon anime that any main character took. We don't have to be mad on 4Kids. On August 19, 1997, Pokemon blessed their fans in Japan with a memorable episode that captured an emotional Butterfree fable. For the uninitiated, Ash and teams helps Butterfree find a partner, as is the mating season for Butterfrees. And since the name of the episode already spoils it, yes, Ash's Butterfree is able to impress the cute little pink Butterfree by saving her along with all of the other Butterfrees from Team Rocket with the help of Pikachu and Starmie. And oh goodness. Anyway, so yes, it is indeed a goodbye for the Butterfree. Of course, Pokemon makes sure that the parting is loaded with heartwarming flashbacks and eye-tearing audio visuals, making it one of the saddest, most emotional Pokemon scenes ever. Oh, at least in the English version. So that's that. It wasn't until October 5th, 1998 though, when the dubbed version of the episode was released in US, that some fans started scraping the storyline a bit more than they should, hearing the words they heard, slightly wanting to be misled into the darkness of an unnerving fan theory. So there were a couple of scenes in the English version of Bye Bye Butterfree where vague things were spoken by our heroes that got some fans worrying about the bug-type Pokemon. We had just started dealing with the sadness of the Butterfree no more being there with Ash in the anime, and now we were also having to deal with the thought that the Butterfree isn't even anymore there in the Pokemon world itself, thanks to these gossips that started flowing left, right and center, saying that Brock is actually referring to Butterfree's demise during these moments that have been translated into unrelated jargon which doesn't mean anything. Even worse, people heard that there actually is a scene of Butterfree dying either in the original Japanese episode or in some raw unreleased edition, which is why these dialogues are sounding odd in this abridged version that we've been watching. So, initially going by what we got to hear in the dubbed English version,
If you don't let it cross the sea, it will never have babies. They have to cross the ocean to start their new family.
and also what Ash says.
If Butterfree doesn't find a mate, it won't ever have
Oh,
babies.
never mind, he's just aping the smart guy. Although, yes, a bit vague of a statement, since they say it twice, we sure can assume that maybe they really wanted to indicate something there, as they took a moment to say the same thing for a second time in the same episode. And as we can agree, I guess, in the world of television, every second matters. Very soon, fans knew that a much better way to find clarity in this would be, of course, to hunt for the actual spoken words in the original Japanese episode, rather than simply relying on the rumors and translation handed over to us. People obviously were eager to really understand what Brock wanted to say in both of these scenes. Needless to say, unlike in the dubbed version, he might very well have said two much different things in both of these lines. So fans all over the internet would reach out to the Japanese speaking audience to learn more about the episode. Was there something that was kept from the American audience? Was a scene or two cut out, which was making the English version seem incomplete? So they waited until they got a confirmation from Japanese fans that in the original episode there indeed isn't anything as such that takes place, and nobody really says anything that would signify anybody's demise, which obviously confused the fans, making them wonder if it really only was some tittle-tattle without much rhyme and reason. And so it made sense to ask exactly what after all does Takeshi say during these key moments. However, due to the unclear nature of the claim, now we weren't even sure what these key moments really were. So people had to go through the entire episode with a fine-tooth comb, focusing on each word our heroes say, especially this guy. And this is what they got. There were basically only two scenes where Brock or Takeshi says a similar kind of thing. This is the original dialogue of Takeshi during first of the two scenes in question. And yes, about the same thing in the other scene as well. At best, it turned out to be a mild case of literal translation, because although what we got in the dubbed English version was,
If you don't let it cross the sea, it will never have babies.
a super precise translation would have been, if it doesn't cross the ocean, it won't leave behind any offspring. Nothing much else of a lead entered the picture. And this much difference in the lines was okay. I mean, come on, it is still an innocuous line, right? Sure, it still is a bit ambiguous, but that's not the only mystery in the Pokemon world. Come to think of it, how did Ash or Satoshi understand what Brock meant in just one go when we're still scratching our heads to this day? I mean, it can mean anything. It could mean that Butterfree would then have to wait for the next season to breed. It could imply that the short lifespan of Butterfree could just accommodate one breeding season. It can mean that Butterfrees just breed with their own generation group. It could mean that they need to breed in the first season to maintain fertility, and about 100 other things. Like Butterfree is indeed going to die after the intercourse, as some monarch butterflies in the real world do. So this is where somebody really dug deep into this to find some clues, scrutinizing each and every word that Takeshi said in the original episode, and actually found a sneaky detail which just might be the reason for all this. As we know now, what we have in the dubbed version is a literally translated line. If that really was Takeshi's words in the original episode, the actual Japanese dialogue would have been this.
海を渡らなければ子供は生まれない。
But since that was not the case, and what we rather have in the original episode is this,
海を渡らさないと子孫の子少なくなる。
it actually helped theorize that maybe the rumor actually came out of the Japanese episode itself, because experts noticed a word right in the center of this line. One word that suddenly became a matter of concern was
子孫。
which means descendants. Okay, fine. The word shison, however, looks rather similar to another Japanese word, which is
子孫。
and shiso doesn't mean descendants. In fact, in some contexts, shiso could signify something quite the opposite, as it can at times apparently be used by native speakers to loosely connect to injury or death. And some may call it a bit of a stretch, but hey, we actually got a link right there. They went ahead to hypothesize that somebody, maybe somebody mistook the word
子孫。
for
子孫。
mixed with the unclear nature of the dialogue and supposed a dark possibility. Carrying on watching Pokemon, initially seeing no sign of Butterfree returning must have cemented the idea further. Of course, the scene was such that maybe at a certain point this misunderstanding becomes understandable, and if this hypothesis is actually true, then I'm sure the confusion would have fueled the fan theories and vice versa, leading to where we are today. Some might wonder if the reason for all this is two similar looking Japanese words, how could the rumor have started from America after the dubbed version came out? To that, for now, I guess we can just say nobody knows where the rainbow ends and a rumor begins. So I guess we can live with that for now, hoping that maybe someday we'll know what everything ever said actually meant, where every person ever lost went. Because whatever our heroes wanted to say, watching the episode, it is clear that whatever happened was Butterfree's wish much more than Ash's. Ash dealing with his emotions towards his first captured Pokemon for what's right for it is what the episode was all about. Just like us, Ash wasn't sure how voluntary of a practice it is for trainers to release their Butterfrees at a particular time of the year so they could breed. He just knew he had to do it the moment he understood it's a Butterfree's good. Some fans thought that it was Pokemon's way to get the Butterfree out of the picture in the least tragic way, because bug Pokemons as insects in the real world might have short lifespans. And even though the makers never stressed much over aging, yes, having it freed by Ash in time might have cleaned the slate up a bit for the writers. And maybe they also knew that in the process of doing so, they were working on one unforgettable episode of Pokemon. Maybe Butterfree did have personality, it just didn't get enough time to portray that perhaps. In a way, the bond needed to develop a bit before this sad departure. Not between Ash and Butterfree, but between Butterfree and us, the audience. It pretty much hit everyone in the face because they knew they were sad but were still learning to love Butterfree, and maybe even had just started to admire Butterfree when he did the courtship dance. Or tilted his head like that. Or wore that yellow ribbon. Or as he finally with his pink partner disappeared in the orange sunset. Back in the day during internet's infancy, going by the fact that Ash cried, people would assume things about the original, saying that it wouldn't be much of a deal for there to be such a scene in some untouched edition of the episode kept somewhere in the Pokemon repository, as it is after all anime. However, as beautifully portrayed by a deleted account on one of the pages of the episode's forum, I would also wish to believe that our Butterfree with his pink Butterfree still resides surrounded by the Caterpies under the sunset out there somewhere. And rest assured that there was nothing cut from the Japanese version of Bye Bye Butterfree. Okay, maybe there was, but certainly not a footage of a dying Pokemon. See you around. Flowers, we all love them, but some are actually dangerous, no matter how colorful and pretty they may appear to be. Such a life lesson. I read a bit about one such apparently beautiful flower recently. No, not the one Venus lays beneath. I rather want to bring your attention to these things. Since many years, they've been amusing us all by just being there in the background of Bikini Bottom, making it feel like everything in the world is also alright. Well, I don't wish to take that feeling away from you, so kindly hold on to it. We can do it. Just a fan theory, okay?
Just a theory.
Even if it is true. I mean, you've sure by now heard many dark and crazy speculations about these 7 deadly sinners anyway. And well, these large colorful fidget spinners sure can be considered underwater characters of the show as well, why not? I mean, they have contributed to the episodes. Interacted with the characters, moved, stretched, distorted, whatnot, been outside of the Bikini Bottom, been to the sky. I mean, you can't really ignore them, especially when other than SpongeBob, they are the only ones that have been there in each and every episode. More than that actually, as they've spilled out and have been witnessed mystifying the background of other shows as well. But did they spill? Or are they? I'll explain. That if considered the show's characters, what is their sin? These freaking floating flowers that forever failed to find fans who'd figure out their funky fangles? So boys and girls, let's wonder what this is. Weird flower, sunk bangle, harmless fandangle, or scandal? And this is the part when we talk about the sponsors, if you had one. And geez, did I call it scandal? What even is fangle? We gotta stop rhyming in intros already. I stumbled upon Kaya Sakina on Twitter, now X, pointing out this remarkable correlation between these guys, the adorable flowers in SpongeBob SquarePants that have been blessing her life since childhood, and these folks that sure don't look anything as adorable as any flower in the world. Which is basically oil contaminating the ocean water over time, cause oil in water can eventually form such shapes and stay on the surface, being less dense than water, and while at it show off rainbow colors as well, due to something I think is known as a thin film principle, which we'll talk more about in a bit. And so the hypothesis goes as opposed to indicating joy, what the so-called bikini bottom clouds have been really symbolizing all this time is basically pollution, as they are oil spills. Although to some people this comparison doesn't make any sense, and I just love some of these comments. But digging in just for the sake of the story, we're gonna look at one classic SpongeBob theory that supports this tweet quite firmly.
And the entire fleet waits in almost agonized tenseness. Now but 5 seconds to go, and...
For starters, it greatly helps to establish the real-life location of the town where these fluffy flower-shaped clouds mainly belong. That is, Bikini Bottom. For which I'll have to skim through the celebrated SpongeBob theory, which actually helps us with a nice baseline here by making us wonder if there's really a Bikini Bottom in the real world. Well, probably, considering that the creators could have named this ocean bed wonderland literally anything, yet they decided to give it a name that is believably similar to an actual place on the earth. A place with a history that's unbelievably dark when compared to what we know Bikini Bottom as. In other words, Bikini Atoll. Once that was called... never mind. Yes, that 6 km square coral reef in the Pacific Ocean, which endured a number of nuclear tests by the US government during the Cold War. So basically, this is a huge area consisting of about 23 islands, and 23 is also the number of nuclear tests that were done here by the US between 1946 to 1958. And yes, Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob himself, actually approves this theory. Kind of. What he did not approve though was a little extension of this hypothesis, which suggests that the Bikini Bottom citizens could actually be resultant genetic mutations of the underwater creatures, owing to the radiation that surrounds the entire area, due to which, by the way, it's inhabitable to this day. So that part hasn't really got Mr. Kenny's appreciation. And you know, it's fine, because even if there is no relation between the aftermath of the bombings at the Bikini Isle and the SpongeBob characters, only the fact that Bikini Bottom is located at a nuclear weapon test site would do, for now. After all, the person who kind of approved it is literally the closest you can get to SpongeBob himself.
Step 1, make a noise like a smoke detector low on batteries.
Although we're not yet sure what he or anybody else from the SpongeBob crew would say about this comparison that we're going about, but since at least these whereabouts are confirmed, this oil-stained thesis just might hold some merit. As Bikini Atoll Marshall Islands had a lot of radioactive material dumped into the ocean. And you know, it's obviously bad for not only marine environment but the water bodies as well, as they can interact with the sea, which, as documented, causes the formation of such oil pollution flowers, if you want to call them that. Because you see, the mechanism of such detonating devices spills oil when in liquid, causing oil spills. And over the years, these oil expels floating on the surface of the water keep spreading out, eventually forming a thin layer called as an oil slick Oil continues spreading, going around and drifting apart, becoming thinner and spreads out a little more, meeting others like them and getting together, now even thinner, finally turning into quite a slim skin that's referred to as a sheen, taking eventually such shapes and ending up colorized thanks to some science and sunlight. Swivel, swirl, spin, whirl, twirl, tween, pink, blue, green, which yeah, may be pretty to look at. I mean, of course, how can something resembling a rainbow ever be bad, right? Yeah, maybe not a good idea. They are catastrophic in more ways than one, as they can destroy the insulation capability of fur-bearing mammals, water-repelling abilities of birds' feathers with their poisonous chemical constituents, be toxic to surface-dwelling animals, wildlife and their habitat, expose our aquatic friends to harsh elements, affect natural waterproofing and water buoyancy, adulterate food supplies causing malnourishment, even impact the sediment when oil at times sink down through the deep, probably upon becoming heavier after mixing with the sand and stuff at the shore and depositing at the ocean floor. So yeah, and there's more, because they do hurt, but not only by being fatal to sea creatures due to oil contamination and by directly polluting these moanas of our planet, but also by being disappointing to the fans of an iconic cartoon series and indirectly spoiling childhoods, which by now you're probably convinced of. And it would be sad to know that these guys have been the effect of oil dumping all this time. Yeah, I mean, these are what for us clouds were in the show's underwater sky. Well, never thought I would say those two words in the same sentence. Vibrant colors, puffy shapes, making us think of nothing else but to just take a whole bunch of unapproved leaves for a summer vacation on some island getaway. Although now it all makes us want to think, why did we even wonder what they are in the first place? But oh well, now that we have, let's take a moment to also wonder what these things were to the one who actually drew them.
Good morning, flowers.
The background designer of the show, Kenny Pittenger, mentioned once that the flowers are actually there to give it some feel, which sounds like something that at least means never to remind us of the horrors that are completely unrelated to it. But whatever he drew, it has now drawn the community to these harmful oil patches in the ocean, and the community is also looking forward to the reason this one gets from the creators once it catches someone's attention who worked on the show. In case it does. Well, I hope it does, and I hope it's unrelated. I guess even Kaya Sakina would want to be wrong about her own theory. And maybe have hope, because Mr. Pittenger went on adding that they function as clouds in a way, but since the show takes place underwater, they aren't really clouds. So really, these sky flowers are mostly a whimsical design element that Steve came up with to evoke the look of a flower print Hawaiian shirt or something like that. So clearly he knows that they can't be clouds because they're underwater, rather the Bikini Bottom's version of clouds. But I doubt it sounds like he's that particular about it. As you know, it's quite common of a thing in the creative experiences, not letting reasoning form barriers in the mental adventures. He did it, they liked it, and it was kept, rather than trying to put a label over everything. Sometimes some things can just be, to be or not to be seen. And anyway, it's just a cartoon, remember? Remember, it's a cartoon. Let's just talk about cartoons and animation and movements for a while and how it all started. I mean, okay, not that far back. That's planned for a future reconvene of ours anyway. I want you to think about this time rather. Yeah, the golden age as they call it. Like the first attempts at flight and swipes, they were humble. The time when you've barely even scratched the surface on a mission of finding a needle in a haystack, sky is the limit. And like with airplanes and mobile phones where it wasn't always this simple, in the world of cartoons too, it used to never be that straightforward to represent an object. The directors, storyboarders, animators, in-betweeners must have had conversations at times like, goodness, how are we gonna animate that in the movie? They had to get creative to convey certain elements, as not everything could be hand-drawn frame by frame. There were limitations, and we could see it being the most ordinary things around us, say a puddle of water or something. So yeah, they're like, hey, we gotta get around it. And one of the ways they used to get around it is by not trying to get around it, using the most obvious approach, trying to get around it. If a little hack can help the story to proceed, why not? Almost like using scotch tape to fix a leg of a show that's going to break a leg at the stage anyway. You never know, the scotch tape might even be considered attractive. A style statement, be a thing of its own. 'Cause it did. You must have seen animations and gifs like these where the outline is always wobbly. Yeah, almost like the lines are boiling, right? That's cause it's the line boil animation, where a constant movement in the form of the figure is made to mimic the imperfections of freehand improvisations and emphasize motion, making it all look quite dynamic. Best for 2D animations with otherwise less action going around in the scene. Well, side note, it's likely to make students think of the onion skin feature from the retired Adobe Flash, which could be used for such an effect. But the origin of it all dates back to much simpler times. It's said that Abai Works was the one who came up with this line boil way of animation. He probably didn't call it that, he probably didn't call it anything. But it's a great innovation that came from a lost hero. Why lost? Well, Steamboat Willie, famous for the first time a Mickey Mouse short was distributed. Mr. Iwerks, on the other hand though, sadly not as much. Yet the challenges were real, of which naming stuff sure must have been least of their worries. And it is around that time when another hero of ours, Eric Cleon Larson from Disney's Creative Core Animators Group, 9 Old Men, developed a method of hand-drawn animation known as the squiggle technique. Yep, the birth of squiggle vision, one may call it. In which, in a nutshell, the focus is on capturing the energy and life in a drawing by focusing on the essence of what's been drawn, rather than getting into the precision of details. So the soul of the object could be conveyed, even if the depiction isn't perfect and realistic. Well, take note of the last one, because although Mr. Larson was mainly inspired by the real-life maneuvers in coming up with this procedure in order to suggest fluid motion and configuration by using loose gestural drawing strokes, one of the results Squiggle achieved along that all was the basic idea of the subject. Enough to just help the audience with the right thought, from where they could take it up, let go of the gaps and just understand. Understand. There is understanding. There's always an understanding between the designer and the consumer in such cases. A mutual understanding to accept that these are curls, this is a mouth, and this is, well, you get the idea, of things that in this age of internet sometimes might be referred to as being out of context.
Discord is not a good thing.
Yet in this case, just acceptable enough. Like one may accept these as flowers for their shapes or clouds for where they're situated, even if that's not where they're suited. As it's theorized that Mr. Hillenberg decided these flowers or clouds to act as a little callback to the roots of the art and pay homage to the classics and their ways. All these systems invented by the greats. So the clouds could be that nod to the cartoon history whilst containing just the right aesthetics required to be in SpongeBob. Yeah, maybe just cause they're colorful doesn't mean it's all oil. Hey wait, and how is oil colorful anyway? Just like the remnants of radioactivity forming these swirly colorful rainbows on the water surface, you might have noticed that similar kind of iridescent effect is seen quite a lot actually in the environment. In peacock's feathers, opals, holographic material, butterfly wings, opals, and well, soap bubbles. Because this fine little touch of rainbow in the nature is possible due to the thin film interference. Here, film is the usual film, by definition, which is a thin transparent material or substance or thing. And thin is, well, thin. Lastly, interference here is the interference between the wavelengths of two light rays caused by the interaction of the properties of light's wave nature with the properties of the said film. So how does this thin thing causes this thin thing interference making colors to show up? Well, I don't know all that much about science, so I'm gonna take the assistance of Yeah, hey, we really gotta rush through this section. Most of the viewers are gonna skip past it anyway. Can we please get to the explanation? I mean, everybody knows you already. I'll add your introduction in the post. Okay. Or maybe not. Thanks. So, let's begin with establishing the meaning of light and colors and the relation between both. Light as we see it, in other words, visible light, if zoomed into, will reveal how it's made up of waves, having properties like wavelength, frequency, and speed. And out of all the possible wavelengths, the ones visible to us humans fall in the frequency ranging from 400-ish to 700-ish nanometers, a range between which the visible light falls. Outside of this, for us, is so out of sight, though may pass through the blinds, but oh so out of mind. Wavelength is the mechanism, but not magic. Magic is the transformation of the attributes of these optical light wavelengths into colors that happen inside of our heads, because these mighty little waves have encoded properties that could be decoded into the magnificence we see around us, thanks to the tools that we happen to have. Eyes that are evolved to become the right apparatus to detect the color of wavelength that's coming to meet the corn cells. Brain, the equipment to help us be fooled by the signals it receives for the colors, despite having just 3 kinds of color capturing cells, due to which we are able to swear to God that it's a yellow banana, regardless of definitely having no application to grab the color in question, but certainly having the choreography in place to make it appear as the mind is the jack of all trades, master of at least one, in reality which is just an ace of the wig, prefect to some, sure an instrument to decrypt the beauty out of chaos, but a professor of none. So yes, that's it. Light is waves. Waves have various wavelengths, and each wavelength looks like a certain color. And although the mixture of all these wavelengths and colors is white light, we see a lot more than just white around us, you might have noticed by now. That is because of the things around us absorbing certain wavelengths and reflecting the others. The wavelength that gets reflected is the one that gets to us, and so we see that object as that wavelength or color. In other words, the colors of the objects around us are the colors that those objects in fact rejected. Our internal color interpretation system embraces that rejection to the point of symbolizing that article at issue by the color it refused. Amazing, I know, right? Roses are red, violets are blue, and it's wild whilst they reach our eyes, meet at a site, to go from the photoreceptor cells in the retina to the optic nerve as electrical impulses on this short drive to the mind, making us witness this attribute of the light through articles and sites around us that choose to absorb and reflect different wavelengths, basically deciding what part of the white light is going on the right, rather than just plain black or white. Although sometimes when everything gets pushed off from the object in question, yes, it just shines bright like sunlight. So basically, the beautiful colors around us are all but in our minds, illusions created by our own selves that make us feel how the world around us to view is such a delight. As a matter of fact, the beauty indeed is in the eye of the beholder, if you like. That's basically how we see colors in a nutshell, in the world. And so this phenomenon of thin film interference occurs whenever light contacts the surface of a film in question. In case of soap bubbles, it's the layer of the soap. In case of some butterflies, it's the structure of the butterfly itself. And in our case, it's the layer of oil that collects on water. So when light hits the top of this film that rests on the surface of water, some of the light passes through, but due to the reflective nature of the film, some of it reflects back. So far so good, but that's not all, because after passing through the thickness or rather the thinness of this film. The light will be passing through the bottom surface of the film as well, where the film ends, after which it's just the ocean in our case. But some of this remaining light would again be reflected back. Oh yeah, that's what we're talking about. And we'll end up with two rays now. Since both would be refracted the same way when they come out, they'll be about parallel to each other. And you know, light is made up of waves and stuff. And so these light rays would be so near to each other that the wave of this one would be communicating with the one of this one. But you see, it's possible that due to this little extra distance that this ray traveled, they won't be the exact mirror image of each other. But if both of the waveforms end up directly aligning with each other, in other words be in phase, where the crests and troughs end up as a puzzle about to be put together and constructed, oh by the way, which is called constructive interference, that's when there'll be colors. And of course they could end up like this, not in phase or anywhere in between, causing, well, destructive interference, where the wavelengths would cancel each other out and no color would be seen. But if in phase, depending on the color that wavelength happens to be interfering constructively, it'd be showing off that particular color. And since the thickness of this oil sheen can't be expected to be uniform throughout the patch, of course depending on the wavelength of the color that is being interactive, there would be different colors of whipcure at different parts of the oil spot. The color would change when the thickness starts to go up. The colors would seem to merge unless we just see like a white, until spots where the distance is so much that we just see right through it, explaining why a soap bubble is not a ball of rainbow. There's difference in the thickness of the soap layer it's wrapped in. Yeah. So thank you. That's thin film interference for you, and the underlying mathematical framework that calculates and describes the effects of this behavior of light as it enters the thin film is the thin film principle that we mentioned earlier. If that all made any sense at all.
Inside, I'm just blue.
So yeah, that was some science and technology for you. So could this really be that what happened here is we saw these guys hanging around in the background of the SpongeBob world at a certain height, and we put a tag of clouds onto them because we have these cotton candies floating over us in our world, things that we call as clouds. Maybe yeah, we adapted those flower clouds to fit our dictionary, to have them give some meaning to us, ever without knowing if that's what they really even have been all this time. Like pareidolia that we discussed in the space iceberg. Maybe things not always happen for any reason at all, and maybe they just turn out to be a certain way so that we can fill in the gaps later with our reasoning rather. Maybe there one day will be found something as such underwater which would resemble these things more than our clouds. Maybe then the underwater fidget spinners won't need to be given funny names other than what they really are. Underwater fidget spinners. Like this anchor here or any other recognizable thing we see in the Bikini Bottom. And we'll then be able to say, hey, the SpongeBob team pre-discovered XYZ, whatever will that be. Will that lead to another hypothesis about Stephen Hillenburg? I don't know. I don't know nothing. I don't even know if this is making any sense at all to you anymore. Maybe there is a reason for it, maybe not. We are now heading to the point where the artist itself would have to feel reserved or reverse engineer everything he or she dreams at the drawing table, worrying, thinking twice, stressed out for being misjudged someday. But we sure know that this can't work like that, because what if they just did that to fill the environment, Jesus Christ? And what they designed just somehow looks similar to what the water at the Bikini Atoll turned out to be. I hear you say and agree. For the sake of content, not everything can be a conspiracy. Let's not ruin the memories, said the underlying message is free. It'd be a far-fetched thought that Stephen Hillenburg or someone from the crew proposed a cartoonish variety of this aftermath of the nuclear weapon testing at the Atoll, so that the fans could overthink about it. Writers could post about it, theorists could report about it, and so-called creators could exaggerate about it. They had to do something about the empty spaces, you see, because of course a lot of water alone would have looked very dumb and boring and dumb. Maybe even would have given rise to some other theory altogether, like, oh, why the underwater world of Bikini Bottom is so empty. Where exactly are they? Are they actually in space? in one of those wide and widely empty, unattended areas out there. Do they even know how it is like down there? Make way for the beautiful nature. Why are there no plants around? Sunken stuff, maybe even flowers. Perhaps some in the air too. Fill it up, folks. Kinda like this, you know? Kinda, yeah, silly creators. Slackers lost the chance of being creative. What a missed opportunity at innovation of going off context and throwing in something out of the world as a backdrop or something. Should have taken the liberty to make, I don't know, bubble rocks or flower clouds or something, which could not only have backed up the absurdity of the series, but also at times be part of the story as well. You see what I'm saying? And if the makers of the show really had no reason for the flower clouds at all, and they were just thrown in without a worry, they perhaps needed to worry while putting them in. Because I'm sure little did they know, one day every their action will be overthought and speculated so much. And had they known, they would have been like, "Hey Steve, don't you think doing this would make it look like that? Should we try to steer clear of these scary fan theories?" Even if that ruins the show. There sure are situations of unsaid handshakes in cartoons with things that shout, "Hey, don't worry about this one, yo." And so with that, I can imagine Steve saying, "It's fine team, go for it. That's best. Kids will take care of the rest." I mean, we know, sure, sometimes there really are hidden secrets that could be believed given enough evidence. Or Easter eggs in the video games planted, wished to not be found immediately, though in hope to be found eventually. Reward endings and unrevealed levels. At times even cursed things inadvertently published, with the media never planned to be put out and found. We are not talking about all that good stuff here, because we don't always want to catch the makers off guard, do we? We don't want to limit their thoughts and stop them from coming up with something remarkable. Like they did, do it once again. For the batch of kids currently experiencing the best times of their life. Oh no, all due to fear of being theorized all the time? Rather, they better get the liberty to offer their magic, where they don't have to think twice about the backlash. Just wonder about the actions. Without holding back the art, do their thing, and leave it to the fans to understand their plans. So, in other words, maybe this was just a coincidence. Raising the need of reason in an artistic world can very well cause the art to leak out of it. Art, for something that by nature is a lie, shouldn't necessarily always require a reason to flow in the direction it's flowing. We should just let it go wherever it's going. And not to mention, SpongeBob SquarePants is unlike a show, let's say Recess, one of my favorites. These kids are in the school. We know how schools are. There are like a zillion things that designers could choose to be in the background or use in the storyline. In case of a show that happens at the ocean floor though, where most of us have probably never been, each step can very well be in a new shoe. They might not be able to find many relatable articles and stuff, considering how most of the seaside of the earth is yet to be unraveled. Even at this stage of the humankind where we're on our way to send our names to one of Jupiter's icy moons, it's hard to imagine the number of species and things that are out there, or down there rather, on our own earth that we are waiting to be discovered. That being said though, if you are still on the other hand of the equation right now and somehow for some reason want this all to be false but these to be true, then I'll say yes. It could very well be factual as well if we look at it from the perspective of Steve. As Stephen started as a marine teacher and a part of his job was to teach kids about the marine life and water bodies and stuff. And knowledge has to cover all the aspects of the concept, you see, including the negative, the dark sides. They can't just all remain in the la la land forever. As a teacher, he would have to talk about all sides of it, even if the knowledge gets crazier than the stuff in the random land. And we have seen that a lot in the show. So since water pollution and marine ecosystem hygiene are all in fact parts of the studies that Steve delivered, it makes sense that Stephen might have tried to drop certain clues from his aquatic knowledge hither and thither on his way of creating things in the making of SpongeBob. Yes, very much possible that Stephen wanted there to be certain sinister angles concealed in the laughs and giggles of SpongeBob. Certainly placed there for the ones to whom they may concern as an underlying message. It could all make sense. Steve did have that pinch of cool insanity in his work. In a way, the SpongeBob that we know today itself actually began as a way to guide children with taking care of the ocean. And other than helping kids understand the dangers, these things sure would have made their way into the series in fragments that we sometimes stumble upon and acknowledge or walk past indifferent to. But either way, it's just fun to swim around and inside the pools of such fanfiction and stuff every now and again, even if it is in vain. In fact, not just this theory about these clouds from Kaya Sakina, there are many other absolutely mind-blowing theories that amazing SpongeBob fans around the world constantly come up with, which although we didn't talk about here, but they also have to do with the catastrophic human interference in the water bodies of our planet in some way or the other. And I know now you're getting late, so... Oh, you want me to go over them as well? Well, then... swell. I guess we still have time, and it's like... Since discovering this oil theory, netizens have also highlighted the fact that the Bikini Bottom city kind of looks like a wasteland built on scrap metal and typical human pollution. Look, the houses are car mufflers. Kinda sorta giving merit to our discussion. A more related pollution theory that points towards the times when the effects of global warming on the environment have been indicated in the show itself. A more unrelated theory that deserves a mention is that the Barnacle Boy and Merman Man were the Navy divers who accidentally were caught in the Bikini Atoll tests. Oh, that's nuts. Heck, how about this video by Not Famous and these articles linking the flowers to boat propellers? Prehistoric Bikini Bottom, flowers weren't there, cause so were not the boats. Makes sense as well, yeah? This hand, this man, these things, what for? All this and more basically imply the massive intervention that humans and human activities have in the underwater lives of the Bikini Bottom citizens, and thereby the marine life of the earth in the real world.
You know, SpongeBob, sometimes it's nice to hang up my hang glider and just watch the clouds roll by.
Yep, and just relax.
Yeah. Relax.
An intervention there is. Even though things at the surface may look fine to us, they may not always be that way. Which is what the show tries to show to us as allegories in ways beyond the puns and jokes. Seems as there's always been Stephen with his knowledge of marine science mixed with an encouraging subtext that's all about nature. Global warming, chemical manufacturing, water pollution, climate change, and of course, nuclear testing. Where we started, where it started. One may think it's been quite a while since Atoll met the criteria for US military to execute the tests. It was just about 2 months after the World War II, and so it all began at this remote ring of small coral islands when 167 people had to be moved for 23 nuclear devices to be detonated on this 2 square mile region, 20 of which were hydrogen bombs. Funnily enough, the first bomb dropped in Bikini Atoll was called Able because it was unable to hit its target ship and missed it. But it was no laughing matter cause its radiation and blast killed 1/3 of the lab animals. Second one, Baker, created a 94-foot high wave tsunami, lifting up Arkansas, a 27,000-ton ship, coating many of the target ships with radiation in the surge of water, and sinking 8 of them. And although the third, Charlie, was called off, how can we not talk about the destruction caused due to the biggest of all 23 bombs? 1100 times the little boy. Bravo, the H-bomb. The first thermonuclear bomb with a weapon-friendly size and underestimated yield, created by its fusion fuel, produced a bigger explosion than what was planned. To be more accurate, thrice the expected amount. Upon execution on 1st of March 1954, this 23,500 pounds device produced a 25 megaton blast, vaporizing 3 of the islands in the atoll, tearing a mile-wide crater in the bottom of the lagoon, spewing radioactive debris that was, as estimated, equivalent to 216 Empire State Buildings, contaminating a number of residents at Rongelap and Utrecht atolls, and an 80 miles away Japanese boat, Lucky Dragon 5, with 23 crew members, one of which, 40-year-old Kobayama Aikichi, died 6 months later and had an autopsy in which the Japanese physicians cited the radiation sickness as the cause of the death. He is considered the first victim of the hydrogen bomb. And the place, which initially only few of the Americans knew existed, certainly became one of the most infamous spots on the planet. So well known, in fact, that if you ever thought that the islands were named after a swimsuit woman wore, the swimsuit was named after it. It feels fair to say that the coral reefs now seem to be flourishing. That was the past, which is gone. But although it may look like that the 60 years of time lapse has turned our Bikini Atoll back into the Pacific paradise it used to be once, as mentioned by the Stanford biology professor Stephen Palumbi post visiting the remote atoll for a 10-day research trip for the PBS documentary Big Pacific, there's more than what meets the eye. Atoll is still littered with parts of exploded planes and ships. Only half a dozen custodians are there now, with food and water imported, tending a small ghost village. The aftermath and the radiations must have been foreseen by the authorities, which is why the area was evacuated well before the bombs were detonated. And it's noteworthy that back in 1970s, after more than a decade or so, although the US Atomic Energy Commission declared Bikini Atoll good to go and allowed its former citizens to move back there and lead a normal life, they quickly realized that it was not the case. And the location actually remained radiated, is still radiated, and by the way, will remain radiated, making it safe for humans not until ever, probably. And so they had to be sent back again. And I'm sure this time they were quicker to agree because the area is no more a place for humans. In fact, right now the only people who are actually there are about 4 to 5 caretakers, which includes Edward Madison, by the way, who has been at the island since 1985. In fact, he is the grandson of one of the original 167 residents of the Bikini Atoll, who were moved before the tests were carried out. Makes me wonder how it must have been for the grandfather when the residents were told that it's going to be a quick return. Yeah, quick. Such huge impact on nature for such long duration of time, needless to say, is not only undesirable for the atmosphere, but the area, the islands, the water bodies must be hugely affected as well. I mean, the groundwater is defiled by what's considered the most violent thing ever done to the ocean. The air is unbreathable. Goddamn, even the coconuts are radioactive. And about these things, as a final verdict, well, if you're here still, I'd say, if you will, be amazed by the theories of thrill and stories sublime, without overthinking them longer than the show's runtime. If you made it till here, awake or asleep, you're awesome. I was really eager to do one of these to fall asleep to compilations because I know how often I fall asleep to such videos online. Thanks for being there. I'll see you around.
Ooh! You know what that cloud looks like?
What?
A flower.
They all look like flowers, SpongeBob. All the time.
They sure do.